Greetings, this is Ray Mofield. We're with our oral history microphone visiting again in Marshall County, and today we're visiting in the home of Lola Peck English. It's a beautiful day, the dogwoods are in bloom, and she has a wonderful place out toward Oak Valley. It's very good that you've allowed me to come.
Thank you. It's good that you're here.
We, of course, visit each Monday with a different person, and I've been wanting to interview you for some time. Would you mind telling us, were you born in Marshall County?
I was born just a few yards up there at that house.
Right
Here, near at the same place.
Yeah, almost exactly the same spot right here in Marshall County. And you were a Peck.
I was a Peck.
Now, could you tell us your father's name?
Luna Oliver.
And your mother was
Cornwall.
Was it Cornwall?
Martha Augusta Cornwall.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember some Cornwalls in the Hardin neighborhood where I saw the light of day a good long while ago, so that's a familiar name. And there was a Lucian Cornwall who taught high school at Calvert City, if I remember.
That was my cousin.
A cousin of yours. Well, I finally struck pay dirt.
Lawrence Cornwall's son.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were born, about, what was your birthday? August 1904. So you've been in the neighborhood for a good long while. Now,
that's right.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I had 6 sisters and 1 brother.
Well, that was a rather large family, I suppose, although
Yes.
a good many...
2 of my sisters died. I don't remember them. They died before I was born.
Mm-hmm. And now let's see. Your dad was born right after the Civil War, wasn't he?
I guess he was. 1866.
Uh-huh.
And he died February the 1st, 1908.
And your mother lived to...
Be 95.
Uh-huh. Born in 1871 and lived till 1967. Now, I remember your mother, of course.
Yes.
And I remember your brother, Lonnie.
Yes.
And didn't you have a sister that worked in Paducah for a good long while?
Vera.
Now, I remember her.
Yeah.
And perhaps others. But, well, what did your dad do?
He was a school teacher, and he was a road supervisor,
Mm-hmm.
and was elected for another term at the time of his death.
Mm-hmm. So he was a leader in this community.
Yes, he was.
I wonder, was he born in Marshall County also?
I imagine he was over, where Uncle Bill Peck lived over there close to where Uncle Bill used to live.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Now, you, did he also have a farm? I was just wondering if you ever worked on the farm.
Yeah, I worked on a farm. Yeah, he had a bottom ground. He didn't have much land up here, but he had bottom land.
And so you'd have to go down and hoe corn. Did you ever do that?
Yeah, chop out corn, we used to call it.
Yeah. Oh, that gooseneck hoe was pretty tough work.
Yeah, that's right.
Boys and girls and men and women both worked right side by side. I remember my mother did, and of course I did. Dad was did what he could in that line. He usually did most of the plowing, of course, handling the heavier stuff. Well, did you ever sucker tobacco?
Yes, I have. Said it too.
How'd that make your back feel?
Well, kind of tired.
Mm-hmm. And did you like tobacco worms?
Not too much.
Yeah. This part of the county, I can remember coming on this road north a few times, even though we lived in the Hardin area, and there was an iron bridge across Clark's River over in this neighborhood, wasn't there?
My daddy was road supervisor when that bridge was built.
Oh, he was?
Yes, he did. Clark's River Bridge down here in the bottom. He was a road supervisor then.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that's really something. I've ridden on his handiwork.
Yeah.
Do you remember the old covered bridge?
Yes, that, of course, that I was grown when that was done away with. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've often wondered what year it was, but I
I
remember.
do not remember that either.
I know we visited my mother's sister who lived at Palma. Must have been about 1931. I know we drove in a buggy down there, and I know we stayed longer than Dad meant to stay, and we were coming back after dark, and the horse got scared. He didn't want to go on that bridge, so Dad got out and led him across through there, and it was pitch black. I never was scared as bad in my life, but nothing happened.
You never knew who was going to be in there, though, did you?
No, you certainly couldn't see. You didn't have any lights at that time. Well, you grew up and worked on the farm, and
went to grade
where did
school
you
at
go
grade school at Oak Valley.
Oak Valley. That was. Oh, we're going to have a reunion again, aren't we?
Yes, I hope.
That's is that about the third Saturday in August? Is it somewhere along in August? I remember.
Yeah, along about the 19th. It's along about my birthday. I don't know just what day it comes on now, but
I remember we laughingly called it, several did, the University of Oak Valley.
yeah.
Had a big crowd and lots of food. Oh, did I enjoy eating that day.
Yeah.
Well, my wife Jeannie went there, of course, so I hope to be back again and see you there.
I hope you are, and I hope I'm living and can go.
All right, do you remember any of the teachers you might have had?
Yule Sled, Lamar Rose, Lena White, Bonnie Stringer, Etta Lee, Ethel Washburn, Emma Johnson.
Say, you just reeling them off right there. Well, that's great. What did you like best that you studied? Did you like spelling? Maybe they had a lot of spelling bees back in those days.
Yes, we did. I know once that when I was small, they had a spelling a match or whatever you want to call it, and they give me out a word, and I almost spelled it, but I missed it. But everybody thought I was going to spell it. I was real small, you know, and they was thrilled to death, but I didn't spell it. but they thought I was
real close. Yeah.
They thought I was going to.
Oh, that's good. That brings back fond memories of those days.
Yes, it does.
And I suppose you had some favorite games you played back at Oak Valley School.
Yes.
Did you ever play marbles?
No, not much.
But you did play crack the whip.
And steel base. We used to play what you'd call steel base, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, so many games. I've forgot all I ever knew about it, nearly.
Well, imagine you did jump the rope and hopscotch probably, and maybe woof over the river.
Drop handkerchief.
Dropping handkerchief. Handy over, you'd throw the ball over the building and so on. Did you ever run off from school and get a whipping?
No, I don't think so. Once, seemed like we was a bunch of us had been up in the woods playing and come in a little late. That was Emma Johnson, I think, she was my teacher, but she wouldn't whip me.
If that sounds like a guilty confession, it's because I did that one time and did get a whipping.
Well, she was my cousin, and I guess she was one of my favorite cousins, and she wouldn't have whipped me.
Well, did you ever have a teacher that made you stand with your nose in the ring?
Oh, yes. I couldn't keep from talking. They treated me awful.
Yeah.
Just 'cause I was good, they treated me bad.
Yeah. Well, that sometimes happens.
Oh, yeah.
Now let's see. When you got grown, did you ever
Married.
go away from this area to work before you
Yeah.
married, or?
Yeah, I went to Detroit. I married in Detroit.
Well, tell us, whom did you marry?
Ray F. English.
Well, that's a good English name, certainly, and,
Yeah.
and I suppose Peck maybe is an English name also. So,
And I had 2 children, Eldred and Norman.
and I believe they're both living.
Yes, they are.
And you also have some grandchildren.
Yeah, I've got, I've got 15, 8 grandchildren, 15 great-grandchildren.
You have 15 great-grandchildren, almost twice as many. Well, that prolific group there. And that's,
I was 3-year-old when my daddy died. And
Well,
my youngest sister was a year old. My
made
mother
it-
had a hard time.
a lot of people, of course, had a hard time, but a widow would have had an even harder time.
And there was 2 grocery stores at Scale. And Mr. Alfred Johnson had a grist mill where we would take our corn and get ground into meal there.
So Scale actually was a community that had some businesses there.
Yes,
a couple of
that's
groceries.
right. And my daddy's daddy was Jake Peck. And my mother's mother was Catherine Starks before she married to Cornwall.
Hmm. Well, that's very good. Now,
They called her Caddy.
this I'd like to get back to your marriage. Now, you went away to Detroit, and you were not married then.
No, I wasn't. He
you
was
were-
working there, and so we all went to Detroit, and then we got married there.
Do
We
you
got
remember about what year that was?
in 26.
So World War One.
May 26.
World War One was over, and you'd gone to Detroit to seek your fortune. Did you find a job there?
I got a job, and then
Do you remember what you did or where you worked?
yeah, I worked at Briggs's.
Now that was an automotive plant
Yeah.
that made bodies and
And
so forth.
I worked at Burroughs Adding Machine.
Yes, that's a noted company. And how did you meet Ray?
We was at a box supper at Scale. They had a schoolhouse there then at Scale. And so I found out his name was Ray, and I always did like the name of Ray.
I do too.
And so I asked that I don't know that I say something to him. Then he finally come and sit by me, you know. And so we just got talking to each other and got to going with each other and went together for a good while.
So things gradually warmed up a little, and the more you saw him, you were still convinced you liked him. The more he saw you, the
Well, we had our ups and downs, but that just went with it, I reckon.
well, of course, nobody lives an absolutely perfect life.
Well,
Uh,
that
what-
was before we married, you know. We would fall out, and then we'd make up.
Now, what kind of a job did he get? Did he work at Briggs also?
Yeah, he worked at Briggs's.
And how long did you stay in Detroit?
Our girl was born in Detroit, and I don't know how long. When our son was born, we lived back here then. And they was,
Your husband may have been like my dad. He sort of missed the country. He always loved farming.
Yeah.
He never did terribly well at it, but he just liked the life in West Kentucky. I suppose your husband did too.
yes, he did.
And so he made the decision to come back. Were you pleased with that decision?
Sure, I never did like Detroit.
It's too big a city.
Yeah, too much for me.
Quite the same
I'm
life
just- Just a country girl, and that's all you can make out of me. And I just never did like city life.
And I was interested in the remark you made a moment ago about Scale also having a school. Now that wasn't much over a mile away from Oak Valley.
No, that wasn't very far.
But they still had the country was pretty heavily populated, and there were large families. And
Yeah.
so you had a school about every mile or so, I guess. Well, the other way would have been a little farther, but I guess you didn't go too far till you went to Bryansburg, did you? Out that road that crosses the highway there now, one end going to Oak Valley Scale and the other going to Bryansburg and so forth. I'm sure they had a school too.
Yeah, they did.
And it wouldn't have been far to Palma. I remember a school there.
Yeah.
I always think of Irving Poe when I think of Palma. Well, we got you back to Kentucky, and you had a daughter, and then along came a son a little bit later. And did they go to school at Oak Valley?
Well, my son did. My daughter didn't. They went to Palma School. And we lived over on the old Bertle place. We bought a place from his dad over there. It always was called a Bertle place.
Uh-huh.
And we bought that, and they went to school at Palma. And we moved here when he was about 12-year-old, I guess, and he went to school at Oak Valley, but she didn't go to school at Oak Valley. There was 6 years difference in their ages.
Well, now let's see. There was also a church building there at Oak Valley, wasn't there?
There's,
In fact, there still is, I
there
guess.
still is.
At the same spot, although it's brick now, and I guess the first time
Used to have 2 front doors.
Well, now, did you have one entrance for the men and another for the women? Was
I think that's the way it was.
A man told me that one time.
Yeah.
Ed Blumenberg, I believe.
Yeah, I
that
think
they
that's-
had an entrance for the men.
The women's door was on the right, and the men's door was on the left. Of course, the women's always right. You know that.
Well,
That's the reason they had that. I guess that
I've
was.
found that it pays to say that anyway, and as long as you want a good supper every night.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Now that was an interesting feature. I remember the first church I can remember was Hickory Grove, a little north of Wadesboro in Callaway County, and my mother grew up in that neighborhood, and we lived in that neighborhood a number of times. And I remember they had an amen corner. Did you ever hear of an amen corner?
Yeah, I heard of it.
Well, the men all kind of sat up on one side, I guess, and
Yeah.
of course a lot of them sang bass. It made for beautiful division of singing there in the
Yeah.
house, didn't it?
I can almost see my Uncle Bill Peck kneeling down in the floor to pray.
Yeah. Well, I've heard some right good singing at Oak Valley in recent times. In fact, my father-in-law one time led singing
Yeah.
there. And of course, he's no longer living, which we've all lost relatives and so on.
I mean,
Well, tell us a little bit about what you remember of things at Benton. Now, that was a town was what, about 5 miles away, so you must have gone there occasionally.
I worked at Benton. I worked at the hosiery mill, and I worked at the cigar factory over there. I worked at the hosiery mill when I was young, and then after I married, I worked at the cigar factory over there.
Mm-hmm.
Priester's hosiery mill at Paducah, I worked at that. And I worked at Hop's cigar factory at Paducah when I was a kid, too.
So they had a cigar factory at Benton and they had one at Paducah.
Yeah.
And those businesses have long gone, but I guess a good many people remember when they were here. Do you remember going to, let's say, Tater Day? We had that recently.
Well, I never did go much. We would always have company on Tater Day, and we'd have a big time of playing, you know, as kids. And Mother didn't allow us kids to go much, you know. We didn't ever go much. And I never did go to Big Singing Day much, because, I don't know, we just never did go.
Mm-hmm. I thought maybe you were one of the leading singers there.
No, they wouldn't have had me.
Yeah. There, when you were young and when I was young, there was a railroad station there at Benton.
Yes.
Did you ever take any train trips?
Just to Paducah. I used to, when I worked at Paducah, sometimes I would ride the train.
Well, do you remember any of the businesses that you used to patronize around in the area? So, did you take your lunch when you worked at those factories, or did you eat at a restaurant around there? I wonder what...
We took our lunch, I think, when we worked at Paducah.
Mm-hmm. Nettie Landon ran a restaurant there sometime in Benton, but I don't know whether it's close enough for you to eat there.
No, I don't think I ever did eat there.
The courthouse, I guess, had burned before you remember.
No, I remember when that courthouse burnt.
I think that is December 1917. So,
Well, I was born in 1904.
well, do you remember your first car?
Yes, when we worked at hosiery mill over there, us girls bought, there's 3 of us, and we bought a Model A.
Boy, that was a good car, wasn't it?
Yeah, I guess it was.
I wish I had about 4 of them now.
Model A Ford.
Yeah. That was the second car I ever had, was a Model A, and it was a good automobile. In fact, I believe when I let it go, it had about 140,000 miles.
I believe it was the Model A. Let's see, which come first, Model A or Model T?
The T was first.
Model T. That's what it was we had, Model T.
Mm-hmm.
Model T.
Well, the only thing I remember about that, and that was my first car, in '37, when I was 16 years old that summer in July. Why, I was old enough to drive, so I had a cow and I sold her. She brought $35, and I gave every penny of it for a Model T Ford Roadster.
I never did drive any much. I would go to where we had our car in the barn, and I would drive it up to the house. And when I would get up to the house, I would get in the back seat, and my sister younger than me and the one older than me, they would get in the front. And my sister just older than me would do the driving. And so once we had just went through the covered bridge, And that road over there was a truck or something parked. It stopped right in the middle of the road, and my sister was going to hit it, and I reached over the back seat and turned off the switch key, and she just barely did miss that truck. It stopped.
Oh, yeah.
By me turning off that switch key. Now, you talk about a backseat driver. That was one that come in pretty handy that time. Because if I hadn't turned that switch key off, she'd have hit that truck. And she wasn't too good a driver, but we got to work and back and her driving. She didn't know too much about it.
Well, of course, the car I had was already worn out, really, when I bought it, and it had a starter on it, but usually it wouldn't start. On the starter, you'd have to crank it. And that is the contrariest thing in cold weather that I ever remember. I know you'd have to jack up a wheel to crank it. Did you ever do that?
No, I never did. I've seen people, though, do that.
Well, it had a planetary gear transmission. Now, that transmission was ran in motor oil, and it had 3 bands in it. I don't know if you remember that old Model T transmission, but the left hand you pushed in, and a band grabbed a disc in there, and the clutch went in, and that put it in low gear. And you let it halfway out, it was in neutral, and you let it all the way out, it automatically went into high. Well, the middle band was reverse gear. You pushed that in while it started backwards, and the right-hand gear was the brake. As a matter of fact, the brakes, someone said, did it have 4-wheel or 2-wheel brakes? Well, it was 2-wheel, but the brakes weren't on the drum. It was, that is, in the wheels, it just clamped the drive shaft. And well, that thing, of course, in cold weather, the oil would get thick as axle grease, and you couldn't turn it over very well. So you jack up the wheel, and the wheel would spin freely, and that way you could crank it and get it started. But that was an awful lot of trouble.
I just don't remember much about it. It just seems like a dream nearly to me because it's been so long ago.
Now, the Model A, of course, was a different proposition altogether.
A Model T is what we had the first.
Do you remember anything about your first radio?
No, I do not know. I know when my mother's aunt, Burnham, they used to have a one of these with a horn, you know, you know, you've seen them. They used to have them, and we'd go up there and listen at that when we was just youngsters.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you and reminisce about your children, your early days of growing up, the school, and automobiles, and your work in Detroit, and then back here in Benton and in Paducah and so on. We thank you for letting us come to your home, Lola Peck English, and we wish you many more years of happiness in Marshall County.
Okay, I thank you.
This is Ray Mofield speaking on the Oral English History Program, returning you to our studio in Benton.